Well, howdy, everybody, and welcome to this evening Sierra Forum. These are our regular conversations that we hold with you, our Sierra Club members and supporters, to tell you about the work we're doing, to be in conversation, and to be in a movement together. My name is Jason Mark. I'm the editor-in-chief of Sierra Magazine. I'm coming to you from Bellingham, Washington, which is the upper left-hand corner of Greater Cascadia, also the traditional homelands of the Nooksack and the Lummi peoples. This afternoon for this conversation all about the state of climate advocacy and where we are at this moment in time, we've got an all-star panel for you this evening. We've got Phil Radford. He's our Chief Strategy Officer. We've got Allison Chin. She's the elected president of our board of directors. We got Melinda Pierce. She's our national legislative director. And we have, last but not least, Kathy Collentine, who directs our Beyond Dirty Fuels work. I do want to say our executive director, Ben Jealous, was supposed to be here with us this evening. He can't because he's in Springfield, Illinois, celebrating the establishment of our newest national monument, the Springfield Race Riot National Monument, which the Sierra Club and other partners like the NAACP and more than 30 other grassroots and community organizations fought for years to get established. President Biden did that this summer, making it the 6th national monument that he's established, and all of those were supported and advocated very strongly by the Sierra Club. So I'm sorry Ben couldn't be here with us this evening. Before we jump into things, I do want to, and we hear from our panel, want to just kind of create a little container and talk about kind of where we're at, the good news and the bad news. The good news is that the Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed and signed into law by President Biden, it's working. And it's getting tens of millions of dollars out there into communities to accelerate the clean energy transition, and it's creating jobs in the process. More good news, we're seeing in some places now renewable energies like wind and solar overtaking dirty fuels like coal, oil, and gas. Speaking of gas this year, we were so excited to see a pause on new LNG export facilities out of the Gulf of Mexico. Kathy Collentine, who directs that work, is going to be talking about it, and it's hugely important. And also on our lands and waters work, we've seen 6 national monuments, as I said, be established during President Biden's administration. And just yesterday, a new announcement from the administration, President Biden announcing a nationwide rule to phase out lead pipes across this country, which of course poisons kids and families, and we've got to do that now more than ever. The bad news is that obviously we're continuing to see the impacts of treating the atmosphere like an open sewer for the last number of generations in the form of devastating and destructive and deadly climate intensified storms like Helene, which hit the Carolinas, and then of course Milton. I saw in the chat, and thank you all so much for being such engaged folks in the chat already. Saw some of you are in Gainesville, or that you're in Tampa, and so definitely we're thinking about you all tonight. You are definitely in our hearts, and hoping that you all make it through this latest climate intensified storm safe and sound, you and your families. In addition to that, of course, we see things like Project 2025 and forces that are laying the groundwork to intensify and expand the extraction of coal, oil, and gas. And then as our new Dirty Truth report, and Phil Radford will be talking about this later, our new Dirty Truth report shows we still just have way too many ratepayer utilities that are dragging their heels on the clean energy transition and that are getting a failing grade in getting off of coal, oil, coal and gas, and are not embracing the clean energy transition. So that's what we're going to hear about tonight. I'm going to try to stop talking and get out of the way so you can hear from all of these big minds. Before I do, I just do want to remind you all that the way that we do this work at the Sierra Club is with your support. We're a grassroots organization. We've got members in every state in this country, along with territories like Guam and Puerto Rico, and we can't do it without you. So please, we invite you sometime during this panel to text SCF or SCF donate to 69866. That's how you can contribute to our work and the work that we're doing here every day at the Sierra Club to advance clean energy solutions, to make sure that everybody, regardless of race, ethnicity, background, has got the same access to clean air, clean water, a stable climate, and opportunities to enjoy wild nature. With that, let's get to the panel. We're going to kind of start with a little bit of a round robin. We're just going to go around the horn and hear from everybody, and hear sort of your take from where you sit, from your place in this organization and your place in this movement, what you think of the state of climate advocacy today. I'm going to kick it off with Allison Chin. So Allison, please introduce yourself to everybody.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Hi, Allison Chin. I use she, they pronouns. I am joining you from Los Angeles, California, the ancestral lands of the Tongva, Gabrielino, and Keach peoples. I guess also by way of introduction, I am Sierra Club president, chair of the board of directors. I've been a volunteer with the organization for a long time, decades, and started out as an outings leader. I've led a couple hundred outings with the Intercity Outings program, now called Inspiring Connections Outdoors. Thanks for the question. I'm optimistic about the state of climate advocacy for many reasons, but chief among them is that as Sierra Club president, I get to see each day the work being done by the Sierra Club, our members, volunteers, and supporters. It is incredibly inspiring to see the level of engagement and involvement from the grassroots on up. And we're everywhere. We've got 64 chapters across all 50 states and Puerto Rico. That's millions of people working to protect clean air, clean water, and preserve the wild places we love and cherish, from the local level all the way up to the matters being considered in our nation's capital or before the Supreme Court. So when I think of where we are in what many of us consider a challenging moment right now, I am hopeful. The major wins that you mentioned, Jason, are issues that we've been leading on the charge on. While we don't exactly know what 2025 and onward will look like from a political or governing perspective, I know that we're well positioned to protect the progress we've made on climate and the environment and build upon it. If policies like the ones laid out in Project 2025 are pursued, I have full confidence in our environmental law program, our chapters, our campaigners and organizers, and volunteer leaders across the organization. We've challenged government overreach before and won, and I know we'll be prepared for the fight if needed. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you for giving that perspective, being in a leadership role for so long here at the Sierra Club. I want to toss over to Kathy Collentine. Kathy, if folks don't know her and her work, she's like really on the front lines out there trying to fight things like frack gas pipelines and LNG exports. So Kathy, from your position, introduce yourself. What do you think about the state of climate advocacy today?
Thanks. And hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Collentine. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of our Beyond Dirty Fuels campaign at the Sierra Club. I am coming in tonight from Ute, Arapaho, and Cheyenne lands in so-called Denver, Colorado. And I'm coming with the message that I am filled with confidence that we have the strength across our movement to meet this critical moment. We are sitting here watching the climate crisis unfold in real time with historic hurricanes wreaking havoc across the Southeast. And that makes it clear that what we're fighting for is right now. It is for us. It is for our future. And the Dirty Fuels campaign, one of the things that really inspires me is to look back as we look ahead. And what we've seen is that our movement, our power, our people power has changed the behavior of the fossil fuel industry. So if you think about campaigns that some of you may have been a part of against the Keystone XL tar sands pipeline, against the Atlantic Coast gas pipeline, against the Dakota Access oil pipeline, we saw the ability and the capacity that we have to mobilize against these projects. And we saw how effective we can be. Both the Keystone XL and Atlantic Coast pipelines have since been canceled. If we hadn't seen a change of administration, we would have seen the Dakota Access Pipeline potentially stopped in its tracks. And actually right now, we have the opportunity to do just that with the Dakota Access Pipeline. And the folks that I work with across the Sierra Club and across our movement are fighting for that action. We will continue to mobilize against these types of projects. But what we've actually seen is that the industry is no longer proposing these interstate, these cross-border, these massive oil and gas pipelines, because we keep pushing back. And because when we push back, we win. And these are victories that are not coming from me alone, right? These are victories that are not coming from the Sierra Club alone. These are movement victories that come from the grassroots, that come from the volunteers here at the Sierra Club, that come from our partners that are both on the front lines, that are tribal allies, that are across this country, because it's people power. And when we push back against even the most powerful, the richest industries in the world, people power can win. And that is what the Sierra Club is capable of. That is what we are capable of when we organize. And so looking right now at what is happening, we have seen a couple of actions just in the last few months where the courts have sent back some of the approvals that they've had for projects to the federal agencies to say, you did not look at the health impacts, you did not look at the greenhouse gas impacts, and you need to. And that is because people have spoken up and said, we deserve these protections. When it comes to methane pollution, right? We know this pollution is very harmful to health. We know this pollution is very harmful to the climate. And what we just saw last week is that the Supreme Court upheld a rule that was passed by the EPA, to rein in methane emissions. And that was in large part because of the number of people over the last decade that took action. Our opponents may have a lot of resources, they may have a lot of influence, but we have the power and we know that we can win. And that gives me hope in our advocacy going forward.
Wow. Thank you for that, Kathy. I don't know about you all. That was like a human shot of antidepressant. Thank you so much for those hopeful words, Kathy. I want to keep that vibe of hope and optimism going. And I'd love to hear from Phil Radford. Phil is our Chief Strategy Officer. He'll introduce himself, but he really has like a bird's eye view over all of our campaigns and issues. So Phil, from where you sit, what's the state of climate advocacy today?
Thanks, Jason. And thank you everybody for joining. My name is Phil Radford. I'm excited to see all the people from Chicagoland because that's my original hometown. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at the Sierra Club, and I have family in Florida right now, and it's a scary time. And so I really appreciate people being here. And for everyone with loved ones in Florida or who is there, we're definitely thinking about you. And we've been putting up resources so that people can donate to the local groups that are helping people there on the ground. And so I hope everyone will be generous to the communities in Florida as well. So my perspective on the climate crisis is that it's urgent, right? I think we all know that, but time is incredibly short. There are a couple good things going on. So on the positive side, we have collectively created the new economy in this country. There are 300,000 new clean energy jobs in the last few years. We are bringing clean manufacturing jobs back to the United States. We're shifting our economy from a dirty, extractive economy to a clean economy with all the jobs, with all the clean air, with all the benefits that come from that. So it's incredible. And even this year, 80% of new energy is coming from solar, wind, and storage instead of fossil fuels. So we're winning. And then at the same time, we have heat waves and hurricanes that are no act of God, right? These are an act of Congress. These are an act of governors. These are an act of state legislatures. These are an act of oil companies and coal companies that have resisted changing to clean energy for decades and decades. And we need to hold them accountable, and we need to accelerate the rate at which we're transitioning our entire economy to a clean energy economy. When you look at all these challenges, I'm incredibly proud to work with the Sierra Club just because we collectively, like everybody on this video, have made an incredible impact. If you look at what we've been able to do, the Sierra Club with our allies have been able to work in almost every court, every state, every legislature, the federal government to shut about 400 coal plants and replace those mostly with clean energy. We've been able to bring clean energy manufacturing and clean manufacturing back to the US. We've been able to transform a significant percentage of our cars and trucks to electric vehicles that can be powered with clean energy. And there's only more momentum happening right now. I've worked on climate change since the year 1999. I ran Greenpeace for several years. And the reason I came to the Sierra Club was I really wanted to be a part of something even bigger. And I think for many of you that are leaders with Sierra Club on this call, whether in our chapters across the country or local groups, I think you get what I mean, right? Like, we wanted to be a part of the organization that saved the Grand Canyon. We wanted to be a part of the organization that created our national park system. It's like 12% of our land in this country is permanently protected because of the people that volunteered with Sierra Club over the last 100 years. And we wanted to be a part of an organization that could work in every state, every city, every court to transform our energy economy from fossil fuels like coal to clean energy. And that's what we're doing. So I feel both a lot of sorrow about what's happening right now as we speak, the impacts that we're seeing from environmental destruction. I feel a lot of hope because we're bending the curve towards clean energy, towards justice. And I feel a lot of confidence that even though things can be rough, the Sierra Club, based on the people power, based on the volunteer power that is represented on this call from all the people who called in, based on the members who give us the political strength and the financial strength that we need to win, I feel a lot of confidence that we can rise to this occasion of urgency and finish the deal on changing this country to a clean energy economy, and then taking care of our neighbors as we adapt to the changes that are happening now.
Thanks so much for that, Phil. And I just want to, Phil was just talking about the grassroots power of the Sierra Club, and I just want to call attention to this wonderful chat that's happening over here. Sorry, my dog is working now. This wonderful chat that's happening over here. People saying where you're from, when you're based, and it's like St. Louis, Missouri, it's Boston, it's Twin Cities, it's Austin, Texas, it's the people in Florida who we really are thinking about, like Phil said. So, I think the power of the Sierra Club and our grassroots power is on display right now on this call. And I just love y'all saying where you're from and giving a shout out. Speaking of grassroots power that can come up to a higher level, I want to hand it over to Melinda Pierce. She's our National Legislative Director. She is an old hand at Washington. She knows the ins and outs of the Capitol. And so from your perspective, Melinda, from the belly of the beast working there, what's your perspective of the state of climate advocacy today?
Thanks, Jason. I don't know if I like being called an old hand just yet. My name's Melinda Pierce. I'm the legislative director, and so I run a team of lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Our office is at the base of Capitol Hill, and sort of from that perch, if I had to reduce my view of the state of climate advocacy to a weather forecast, I would say it's partly sunny with a chance of storms on the horizon. As Kathy, as Phil have mentioned, we've made some huge gains on climate action, but obviously there's so much more to be done. And the future forecast for that work could be uncertain. But I want to project positivity. I am super energized by the kind of legislative wins, again, from my perch, that we have won over the last 2 years. Remember that Congress passed the most massive investment in climate and clean energy action when we passed the Inflation Reduction Act. And now what's really awesome about the power of the Sierra Club chapters and staff around the country, they're working to implement that law. And so making sure money is being put to good to drive economic benefits, to achieve real world difference in people's lives. So that legislation, as y'all know, and as Phil has emphasized, has spurred the deployment of wind and solar and supported clean energy manufacturing of EVs, of solar panels, of batteries, here in America. And all the while creating 330,000 clean energy jobs. So that work, that climate bill is transformational, and we have to continue the job of making sure, again, it's implemented in the field. And then switching from ledge to admin, the Biden administration has issued dozens of environmental and public health regulations. Those are strong standards to protect clean air, clean water, like the Dirty Truth Report. We have regulations that will slash pollution from power plants, from oil and gas operations. And just yesterday, the Biden administration issued an order replacing all lead pipes for drinking water systems. And then, of course, near and dear to my heart, the president has used his authority to protect public lands, waters, wildlife, the national monuments that Jason mentions, but also other lands and waters in Alaska, California, Colorado, New Mexico, you name it. And those kinds of victories really show the strength of our movement and what we can achieve. And like Kathy speaks about, the power of organizing in this fight. But storms ahead, let's be clear, there's still work to be done to meet this moment before us and avoid the very worst impacts of a warming climate. And that's why we're working arm in arm with other partners, other lobbyists on the Hill that I get to work with, to build progress, to build upon the progress we've made to address the climate crisis, to tackle the extinction crisis. And so we have to avoid the potential storms on the horizon. We have to continue the progress that we've made. We have to hit the accelerator and push for bold executive action from our next president, from a new Congress on climate and conservation. And hopefully we're doing this all together.
Thanks for that perspective, Melinda. And I'm sorry, I did, old hand. I should have said, if you all don't know, Melinda Pierce, she is like the Steph Curry of environmental advocates on Capitol Hill. She is on top of her game. She is the greatest of all time. So that's what I meant to say. She's the Steph Curry of environmental advocacy in Washington. Melinda was talking, and used this weather metaphor, but weather is real and it's hitting people right now. I'm seeing people in the chat again from Florida, from the Carolinas. So I do want to make sure we talk about that for a second, because it's real. Like, people's lives are in danger. People are losing their homes. And as Phil said, I thought very well, like, this isn't an act of God, right? This is an act of Congress. This is an act of ExxonMobil. This is an act of Chevron and the fossil fuel executives that have led us to this place. I'm wondering, Allison, if you could talk about, as you've watched the human impacts happen in the Carolinas and now in Florida with Hurricane Milton, just kind of what's come to mind for you, and how does that kind of connect again to our climate advocacy?
Ooh, wow, Jason. Well, so much. And again, really thinking about our friends and families in Florida and what they're sort of bracing for. This is the climate crisis in action. It's not just the environmental movement making the case for the urgency of tackling the climate crisis, but it's nature itself telling us loud and clear. And last year was the hottest year ever recorded. After this past summer being the hottest summer of record, this year could end up surpassing what we saw and experienced last year. The result is not just deadly heat waves, it's the intensifying wildfires, it's the climate-charged superstorms like Helene and Milton. And we know, right? We know the solution is to ditch fossil fuels for clean, renewable energy sources like solar and wind as quickly as we can. The back-to-back phenomena of these storms, of Hurricanes Helene and Milton, spells just disaster for our communities in Florida. So there's this crushing weight, the expectation of what's going to happen over the next several days. Milton is projected to cause more destruction, more storm surge, higher storm surge levels, potentially higher rainfall rates in places all along the west coast of Florida. Finally, there's also there are no so-called climate havens. Asheville in western North Carolina had been considered by many to be a refuge from the extreme heat and storms of climate change due to it being inland at high altitude, etc. But the floods still came. As we focus on getting off fossil fuels, we also really need to focus on creating more resilient infrastructure everywhere.
I think we might have. Thank you so much, Allison. And I think that's right? The question is now, it's not enough to simply halt emissions. We also need to adapt, and we need to adapt to this new world that we're living in. I don't think anyone here is being naive about what we're facing. We're really being eyes wide open about the twin threats and opportunities. Speaking of twin threats and opportunities, I want to hand it back over to Kathy Collentine, the director of our Beyond Dirty Fuels work, to talk, about the work that you talked about it sort of a broad level, but like really, I wonder if you could unpack a little bit the LNG pause we saw earlier this year is kind of one of our biggest victories. And there's just a new study that came out the other day about how actually dangerous LNG is. It could be worse in a global perspective than coal, and kind of unpack that for folks, and the twin threats and also opportunities to stop it.
Absolutely, and appreciate you bringing up this victory that we have been celebrating around the pause on gas export terminals, but also acknowledging that it's not the end of the road and there's more that must be done. So, what I mentioned earlier is that our work is changing the way that the industry operates. The oil and gas industry is seeking to expand. Let me be very clear about that. They're seeking to do that despite all of the evidence that so many of us know, all of the scientific evidence showing that we cannot allow for increased oil and gas expansion if we are going to avert the worst of the climate crisis. And so what we also know is that demand for gas, demand for oil, demand for fossil fuels in the US is going down, and the industry is still attempting to grow. And so they're doing that by finding what we could consider new markets for their products or different places. They're shipping them overseas with exports. They are looking to increase dependency on products like plastics that are created with petrochemicals, and they're trying to invest in projects that are going to keep us hooked on oil and gas, hooked on fossil fuels on into the future. And this effort, this hurts the climate, this harms communities all along the production life cycle, right? If you are from a community that is familiar with what it means for there to be fracking in your community or extraction, if you are from a community that is along or near a pipeline route for oil or gas across the country, if you are from a community along predominantly the Gulf Coast in Texas and Louisiana, where these gas and oil export terminals, but also petrochemical facilities are being proposed, and so many other communities across the country, you know firsthand what it means to have polluted groundwater, to risk leaks and explosions, to deal with the pollution and the danger from these facilities. And you also would know firsthand that we can't continue to perpetuate the longevity of the oil and gas industry. And some progress has been made. As was mentioned in January, the Biden-Harris administration made the historic decision to pause the approvals of gas export applications at the federal level and to update what information it uses to determine whether or not they can approve them going forward. And now coming up this year, we have the opportunity to bring the people power, to bring the comments of the public, to influence how that process plays out. Now, we know that the answer to any new proposed gas export facility needs to be no. And the Sierra Club will be a part of a coalition, will be a part of a movement that will put pressure on these agencies to ensure that they are taking the actions that are necessary in order to say no. And this is the strength and power of our movement that I was talking about before, that we need to bring to bear on a decision like this because of the impacts that it could have. So when we're speaking up, when we're engaging on these issues, we need to ensure that we're not only listening to those who are on the front lines of these crises, but also making sure that we are amplifying all voices as loud as possible, because these voices matter. Your actions matter. And as part of the Sierra Club, we believe in the power of the people, and this is a clear opportunity between now and the end of the year to take an action that's going to have wide-ranging effects on something that we know needs to happen in this moment to stem the proposed expansion of the fossil fuel industry that we cannot let come to pass. And so I hope you will all join us in that opportunity going forward.
Thanks for that, Kathy. That's exactly right. I mean, that's how this all works, folks. Like Phil was saying earlier, it truly is people power. This is a people-powered organization, and we can't do it without you. But Kathy was also talking about people perpetuating the longevity of their deadly fossil fuels. And that is in some ways a good or a bad segue to a report that we released today. I think it's the 4th annual Dirty Truth Report, in which we scorecard utilities across the country. It was just released today, Wednesday, October 9th. Phil, could you tell us what was in it? Because I think it's a really good kind of snapshot to where we're at, successes, and also the work that still needs to be done.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So for a little bit of a backstory, in the year 2000, our former President Bush and Dick Cheney passed an energy policy, and they wanted to open 200 new coal plants in the United States. That would have been game over for the climate. I'm sorry. We had amazing volunteers in the Midwest who decided they would take on those coal plants, and they just started doing research. They started looking at the permits that the coal companies were filing to open new plants. They started investigating if what those utilities were doing was legal. And they found, just from rolling up their sleeves and asking for public records, that the companies had failed to apply for the correct permits and were actually starting to build these plants illegally. And so they worked with Sierra Club attorneys and staff throughout the country to block almost every single one of those coal plants because many of the utilities were so sloppy. Next, they decided, let's take on this new fleet of coal, or the existing fleet of coal plants, and transition to clean energy. And as I mentioned before, those volunteer leaders, Sierra Club staff, Sierra Club attorneys, all of our members came together, and we were able to shut around 400 coal plants. Every year we look at how we're doing, what the trends are, and if utilities are on track to keep their promises that they made to meet President Biden's objectives for phasing out coal mostly by 2035 and hitting the carbon pollution goals that the country has. And what we found, I don't think will surprise you. We found that, unfortunately, we still need Sierra Club. We found that the utilities are planning to build more gas instead of clean energy, even though clean energy is winning in the marketplace, that they are slow to reform, that they are somewhat dinosaurs and slow-moving companies, and that unless we continue to pressure them, their preference is to do what they know how to do, build giant gas plants instead of build clean energy, solar, wind, storage, make our homes more efficient, put more money in consumers' pockets rather than theirs. They just won't do the right thing unless we keep up the pressure. There are some headwinds, right? AI is leading to increased demand for energy. We have succeeded in making sure that green manufacturing and great jobs come back to the US. All of these things are, the green manufacturing in particular is great, but we can supply that and we can power that with clean energy. And so we'll continue to push them. I do want to point out, because some people have asked about what happens depending on who's in office in the future. Sierra Club stopped coal plants and shut coal plants through Bush and Cheney, through President Obama, through President Trump, through President Biden. And clean energy is winning in the marketplace, and we are winning in the courts and the court of public opinion. And we will continue to do that no matter what happens coming up. The fight is here, the urgency is now, and we have to continue to shut these plants. We can't win any of that, obviously. Like whenever we sue somebody in order to shut a coal plant, we do that representing our members. We have standing to sue because the coal plants are hurting our health, right? Whenever we intervene in Congress or in a state, we're doing that representing our members because they only listen to us because they know we represent 4 million people that don't want their kids' lungs to be the air filters of dirty energy companies' pollution. And so you all being here is incredibly powerful. You all supporting us as members so we can represent you in court, so we can represent you in Congress, and so we have the resources to continue this work, especially in what could be one of the hardest times for us all in the upcoming years is incredibly important. And so I hope you will join me in being a monthly donor to Sierra Club and a member, because we can't win these things without both having the political power you give us to say we have 4 million people and the resources we as a nonprofit need to be able to do our work.
Thanks for that, Phil. Thanks for the overview. And just to draw people's attention to the chat, a couple people were asking where they can find the Dirty Truth Report. Thank you to the folks on the back end of the production studio who are keeping this chat live. You can find it online on our Beyond Coal page, on the Sierra Magazine page to learn more. And again, too many utilities are getting a failing grade, but as Phil said, we push them across regardless of who's in office, and we're going to continue to push them regardless of who's in office. Speaking of Phil was referring to the utilities as dinosaurs. Speaking of dinosaurs, let's talk about Project 2025 and Project 2025's retrograde, a Cretaceous era vision for this country. So Melinda, what is Project 2025 and what should people know about it? And I guess really why should they be concerned?
There you go, going with the dinosaur age thing again. Thanks, Jason. I know I'm the closer. I know folks are eager to get to the question and answer, but it's really important to spend a little time focusing on Project 2025. I suggest everybody go ahead and Google Project 2025, spend a little time reading about this framework that, if implemented, would dismantle our government system of checks and balances, undermine independent agencies, and really consolidate power in the presidency. It is a 900+ page document. It was crafted by the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation, and it lays out policies and priorities for every government agency, and they're dangerous and they are alarming. So, for example, the energy section was literally written by fossil fuel interests, including 2 high-power Western energy lobbyists who represent more than 200 oil and gas companies. And so you can imagine that the plan calls on the Department of Interior to establish fossil fuel extraction as the dominant use of our public lands and waters, advocating for more drilling, more mining of coal, oil, and gas at the expense of our planet, at the expense of our health. A couple more examples. Project 2025 calls for the repeal of the Antiquities Act. That's the power of the president to designate historic and cultural lands and for designation as a national monument. What's happening tonight in Illinois with the Springfield Race Riot National Monument. That plan openly advocates that the Tongass National Forest be open to road building and increased logging. And then considering the action down in the Gulf with the deadly and dangerous extreme weather that we continue to see, one of Project 2025's provisions would repeal the power of NOAA and gut the National Weather Service. And that's what, helps us forecast hurricanes and get evacuation orders out. It would slash funds for FEMA and other, disaster relief programs. So the plan is dangerous and a threat, not just to our environment and the wild places we care about, but also to our safety. And so I'm so encouraged to have a conversation with folks tonight, expose that dangerous plan, and see if we can together fight back on that.
Thanks, Melinda. Thank you for that overview. And yeah, folks should just Google it. And you can read it all there. We want to have a conversation tonight. That's why we do these forums, so we can really hear from you, our members and supporters, who, as we said, are the engine and the backbone of the Sierra Club. Please go ahead and put questions you have and do your best to put it in the form of a question with a question mark on there. And we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. We're not going to be able to get to all of them. While you're sort of teeing up some of your questions, we did invite you all to submit questions in advance, and we have some of those we do want to address. There was a lot of questions from folks about what you might call climate change communication. Like, how do you connect with folks who maybe are not yet seeing with their own eyes or feeling with their own bodies, like the intensity and the urgency of this crisis? So I'd love to hear maybe from you, Allison, though anybody's game to take this. How do you convince others who might not be aware that this is an urgent crisis? Like, what do you think are some of the ways to kind of break through? So I'll toss it to Allison, but I think anybody should be is invited to answer that one.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Well, I think we are seeing that people understand that climate change is a serious threat, and humans are the cause, right? We see this in public polling. And it seems to me, too, that more now than ever before, folks are having their own personal experiences with those impacts. Surveys also show that while there's public support for policies to tackle the climate crisis, the importance of holding corporate polluters responsible is high on that list. So, polluters you can't pollute with impunity. Expanding public transit options and electric vehicles so they're more accessible to more people is important, including more renewable energy, protecting, and protecting our forests. I think it's less about the merits of the different policies. It's about the merits of different policies, not whether or not we need to take action.
Thanks for that, Allison. I just want to underscore one thing Allison said is that, you look at polls from environmental organizations or pollsters like at the Yale Climate Communications, and yes, kind of making the very clear case that polluters did this, industries did this. Industries have known for decades about the science of climate change. And when people hear that, when they hear that people knew back in the 50s and the 60s what this was going to do to our planet, that's a powerful way to crack through. Does anybody else want to take that, or should we go to the next question? Okay, here's one maybe for you, Phil. We had a lot of questions from people about how do we also include biodiversity and species protection in the climate change dialogue. And I think this gets into how do we braid Sierra Club's long-standing work for wildlands and wildlife with the 21st century work?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think first and foremost, saving species, saving wildlife, saving nature on its own terms is crucial, right? So I think including it in the climate change dialogue is important, but really, I mean, the reason many of us are involved in the Sierra Club or other organizations is to protect the people and the places that we love. And so I think first and foremost, there are so many amazing places to protect. I think second, from a climate perspective, it's crucial for us to invest in how our communities adapt, but also how nature adapts, right? So for every few degrees temperature changes, every ecosystem will shift several hundred miles away from the equator. And because of sprawl, because of fragmented ecosystems, in order to save species, in order to save nature, we need to make sure we have wildlife corridors, that we're thinking about how we conserve nature in a way that preserves species and preserves nature so that it can naturally adapt. Obviously trees, wetlands, mangroves store a huge amount of carbon in the soil and methane in the soil, and are crucial because if that methane escapes, if the carbon in the soil escapes, all of that is pollution that is what is driving the heating of the atmosphere. And so it's essential we protect all these places, both to store carbon and not accelerate global warming, but also to make sure that nature can adapt and that we have the biological diversity that we need moving forward. I mean, it goes without saying that, the majority of medicines were originally found in nature in some form and that we're dependent on it. And if we just continue to destroy biodiversity like we are now, where we're losing more species than we were when dinosaurs went extinct, we're just in trouble as humanity, ignoring the fact that nature in and of itself has value.
Thanks for that, Phil. I'm sure a lot of our members love to hear that. That yes, there's these other benefits to saving wetlands and forests, but we want to protect species for their own intrinsic rights. So if Melinda's the Steph Curry, you were LeBron and just slam dunk that one. So thank you for that. Melinda, this one's for you. We had some questions that came in before the conversation. One participant wrote, and this is not my words because I live in the Evergreen State, but one of our supporters said, I live in a place where most public officials still don't acknowledge climate change. What is the best messaging for these folks?
Appreciate that. And obviously this is a challenge that we have, as lobbyists working Capitol Hill in a closely divided Congress. We can't just talk to one side if we're going to get anything done. So when our lobbyists go up to the Hill and we talk with officials who are hesitant to, or we don't really talk to the denialists, but are hesitant to acknowledge climate change or acknowledge that humans have a role to address it. The most effective messaging seems to focus on local impacts and, of course, economic benefits and economic costs, benefits of clean technology or protecting public lands. I mean, the truth is climate impacts are everywhere and no one is immune. Red states and blue states, whether it's flooding in Iowa or drought across the heartland impacting farmers. These are traditionally red state issues. Whether it's wildfires or extreme heat, climate impacts are everywhere. And those have an economic impact on communities, an impact that these decision makers have to address. But luckily, the solutions have economic opportunities. And we talked earlier about the Inflation Reduction Act, which is driving investment in communities and creating new jobs. And what's really interesting about the disbursement of the Inflation Reduction Act is more of those monies have gone out to red states than blue states. And I'm confident both with the realization of the economic cost of climate inaction, but also the economic opportunity of the solutions. And when they see this work on the ground, we're going to win more and more red states and middle of the road folks over, as we do our work.
Thanks for that, Melinda. Really appreciate that perspective. We're going to go. We've got, again, thank you all so much for being such an engaged audience, like so many wonderful questions and comments here. I want to go to one. I'm sorry I missed the name of whoever put it in, but I think this one is like for you, Kathy. It's how can people stop or oppose fracking projects in their own backyards and in their own communities?
Yeah, so going back to some of the points that Melinda was just making on the best messaging, public health is one of those components that resonates across the political spectrum, that resonates with all of us as individuals. We want to live in a place where our family can be healthy. And what we know is that when there is oil and gas extraction, when there is fracking in our communities, there's pollution in our communities. And we can't go about our day-to-day life in a way that is as healthy as if we were on renewable energy. We had transitioned off these fossil fuels and we didn't have an increase or proposals for fracking that could contaminate not only the air, the water, but also our public health. So another point to bring up. But when it comes to taking on projects, if you're in a community where you know that there are proposed fracking projects or there is fracking happening, every state and locality has some differences in the process by which these projects are approved. And so getting together with your friends, with your neighbors, with the folks who are concerned, and ensuring that you have an understanding of who's making these decisions so that you can go and talk to them. You can bring these messaging points, not just to the public, to your friends, to your neighbors, to those who might be concerned about this, to bring them on board, but actually to the people who are making these decisions and influence them. armed with this information, armed with the power of the people and organized presence, you can stop these projects. I started with the Sierra Club over 10 years ago here in Colorado, and we have been fighting against oil and gas extraction, against fracking all along the Front Range in this state. And it is because of people who engaged with their local officials, who went to their county and state level meetings of state agencies that were approving these projects, that we have been able to continuously raise concerns, stop the projects, and even change state policies that allow these projects to continue. And so there are pathways, there are other communities who have laid the groundwork. And so whether you're looking at what's happened in Boulder County in Colorado, or looking at some of the work that's been done in places like Pennsylvania or down in Texas and New Mexico, where there is a large concentration of fracking proposed, there is a pathway. So don't feel like you're the first one to do this. Go on the internet, do your research, connect with your local Sierra Club chapter, and get the information that you need to bring people together and to find out how are decisions being made, who's making them, and how you can get directly involved to have those conversations with those people so that you can find the pathways forward for your community to stop those projects. And it's going to be a little bit different everywhere, but we can learn from one another. And I think that's what makes our movement even more powerful, even stronger. You are not alone in fighting these projects. You are moving into a movement that is strong and that has victories, and you can learn from those and apply those in your own community. And I'm excited to hear that folks want to take that action. I think that that's one of those things when we're talking about what brings us hope. It's coming together with people who care about issues that are similar to what you care about, and it's taking action together to make the change that you want to see. And this is the perfect way that you can start doing that if this is a concern in your community.
Thanks for that, Kathy. We're going to do one more audience question, then we're going to have another question for the panelists and kind of a lightning round. So speaking about working with others, I don't know, Phil, if you want to grab this, or maybe back to you, Kathy. There's a lot of questions here about like collaboration. You know, how does the Sierra Club work with other organizations, partner groups, to not be siloed? Someone had a specific question about how or whether we work with labor unions. So I think this kind of gets to what Kathy was just saying. I don't know if Phil or Kathy, you guys want to talk about how we're sort of part of a larger ecosystem.
Phil, you want to go ahead?
Kathy, you can take a hack, and I'm
okay. Great. So I think when we look across the climate movement, what we know is that we, like I said, are not alone in doing this work, whether it's at the local, the state, or the national level. There are organizations, there are individuals who care about the same things that we do. And I think that it's really important for an organization like the Sierra Club to continue to reach out and find partners, because we are both everywhere and we are not the only ones who are present in those communities. And so coming together with our partners can allow for us to see things from different perspectives and come up with better solutions. When we think about partners across the labor movement, when we think about tribal allies, when we think about folks who live on the front lines of the climate crisis in a particular way or another, what we see is that there are different perspectives, and we are stronger with those different perspectives coming together to work towards a common goal. And so one of the things I would encourage all of you to do is, if there's an issue that you're working on in your community, if you're trying to influence a decision maker, if you're thinking about how is that person going to hear this message that I want to deliver, whether it's on the economy or on health impacts, it may not be that your voice is going to be the loudest one to carry that message. It may be that a partner's is. And so how can you work with partners to ensure that decision makers are hearing from all of us, from all these different perspectives, so that we can influence the outcome, regardless of the issues that are going to resonate the most, because they do need to hear from multiple perspectives. And at times, it's our partnerships that really help us to achieve the victories that we know that we need, because they are able to speak from a perspective that the Sierra Club isn't in a position to bring. And our role is actually to strengthen those partnerships and to boost their ability to be heard in that moment, because we are working together towards common goals. So really love that question. And, please keep looking to who you can do this work with to keep on building this movement stronger than it is today.
Thanks, Kathy. That was another dose of human antidepressant. Super appreciate that. And like Kathy was saying, like the kids say, to change everything takes everyone. So yes, this is a movement of movements, and we're working with all sorts of partners. Just want to thank our panelists. Want to thank you all. Don't jump yet. We got a lightning round. We've got a question for everybody. Before we do the lightning round, I do just want to remind people that we can't do this work without your financial support. Anything helps, everything helps. Please, if you could, text SCF. That's like stands for Sierra Club Foundation, I believe. Text SCF or SCF donate to 69866. That's 69866. Oh, good. It's there on the screen. Follow those directions. And again, really appreciate all of your support, financial, life force, or otherwise, and the work that you all are doing. So our last question here for the lightning round, and we'll go maybe Allison and Melinda, and then Kathy and Phil is, and this is 1 minute each, so we close it out on time, respect people's time. What's giving you hope? And if you could have one action for people to take, what would it be? So what gives you hope, and what action would you like people to take? And we'll go Allison, Melinda, Kathy, and then Phil.
Thanks. Oh gosh. Well, what gives me hope is that I don't have to do this alone, and that there are just slew of partners and co-conspirators and collaborators that I can draw from and work with to really tackle climate change and the questions that we're grappling with. I think my ask would be really encouraging folks to help us financially. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks for being here tonight. We'd appreciate donations and welcome donations of any and all sizes. So please give to help mobilize folks and help us, really tackle the climate crisis.
All right, I'm up, Jason, without an age joke. What gives me hope are the young people. No, the folks that are on tonight that are interested and engaged and wanting to educate and update themselves, bringing their own passions to a call like this. That's how we will win, by everybody engaging. And, from my perch on Capitol Hill, I would encourage folks to make your voice heard and to engage in policies and debates that you're passionate about. The folks back who are governing in Washington, D.C. have to represent folks from their district and from their states. And so make your voice heard.
Jumping in about what action folks can take. I think you have all heard about what's giving me hope. But the comment section is full of links to actions that y'all can take, webinars that are coming up, reports you can read. Copy some of those links. Take one of them home with you. Share it with friends. What we know is that the Sierra Club needs to continue growing. This movement needs to continue growing. And that happens by doing outreach to the people that you know in your community. That happens by joining your local Sierra Club chapter, volunteering on an issue that you care about, and sharing this with the people that you love. So I hope that each and every one of you will take an action out of this call tonight and continue to help this movement grow and make us powerful together.
I think I'm last. So what gives me hope is, fundamentally there are two kinds of power in this country. There's organized money and there's organized people. And the oil industry has a lot of organized money. Lord knows they are pumping it into political campaigns. Somebody in a question asked what needs to happen to get money out of politics. It's a real question because organized money has a lot of power. And the only thing that over and over again beats organized money is organized people. And 4 million people with the Sierra Club and millions more with our allies are what it's going to take to win. And so I really want to thank you all for coming. If I could ask you to do one thing, it would become a member of Sierra Club. And that means a few things. It means, one, we have the financial resources we need. Two, it means we don't need to take corporate money from polluters or other people. We can stay independent because we're powered by people. Three, it means that you can join a chapter and join us in acting in your community if you'd like. And it just gives us the political influence and the financial resources that we need to keep shutting these coal plants, that we need to stop the extinction crisis, that we need to stop the climate crisis, and we need to be ready for the challenges ahead. So thank you all so much. And I would ask that you join us in becoming a member of the Sierra Club. And Lil Bean asked how, and there should be a link in the chat.
Thank you, everybody. And there'll be a link following up. Phil was talking about, we got organized money power and you got organized people power. And this was a demonstration of that this evening. Across all platforms, we had more than 1,000 people tune into this conversation. And that's a lot of people. Having 1,000 people all organized together, that is people power. That's us organizing folks. So like Phil said, if you're not already a member of the Sierra Club, please join us. In the meantime, thank you for all the work you're doing. Take care of yourself. Take good care out there, especially those of you in Florida or in the Southeast. Keep up your great work. Keep in touch, and we'll catch you at the next one of these forums. So go safe.